Morning. I'd like to welcome you to another edition of our Anchored in the Word morning reflection. Today we are in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, and we're looking at verses 1 through 4. So if you have a Bible, I'd like to ask you to take it, and let's turn together to Ecclesiastes 9, and we'll read the first 4 verses of the chapter. For all this I considered in my heart, even to declare all this, that the righteous and the wise and their works are in the hands of God. No man knoweth either love or hatred by all that is before them. All things come alike to all. There is one event to the righteous and to the wicked, to the good, to the clean, to the unclean, to him that sacrificeth, to him that sacrificeth not. As is the good, so is the sinner, and he that sweareth as he that feareth an oath. This is an evil among all things that are done under the sun. There is one event unto all. Yea, also the heart of the sons of men are full of evil, and madness is in their hearts while they live. And after that they go to the dead. For to him that is joined to all, the living, there is hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. Now, when we read the passage in front of us, we see a very interesting set of observations from Solomon. And let's remember that what Solomon's talking about in this section of the book is really continuing his thought, dealing with this idea of the fact that just because someone does what's right doesn't mean that they're going to have an easy life, or just because someone does what's evil means they're going to have a hard life. As a general rule, we see that bad decisions play out in bad outcomes, and good decisions play out in good outcomes. But what Solomon's observed in life is that there's a lot of uncertainty. It's not like there's a formula that you plug in, and if you do this, you get this. And so he's kind of continuing in that thought. Now, yesterday we talked about the fact that God is sovereign. And because God is sovereign, there are certain things that we need to do in relationship to him as the one who's sovereign. We need to be humble. We need to trust him. We need to recognize that we don't control everything in our lives. And so it's impossible to even do it. So when we come to this passage, we're going to see that this is a continuation of those thoughts. And the title that I gave this lesson is Hope in Life. And you might say, well, it doesn't seem like a very hopeful passage. Well, what's interesting is, by the end of the passage, you will see that there is a statement of tremendous hope and encouragement. And not just tremendous hope and encouragement, but it's really also a challenge, and he gives it in the form of a proverb. But let's begin, first of all, with a summary statement. A summary of this passage is, don't fret over what you can't control and seize the opportunities that are before you. When he emphasizes seizing the opportunities that are before you, he's basically saying, hey, what you can actually influence and what you can actually take advantage of is not what's already taken place, not what you hope is going to take place or what you think is going to take place, but what you're actually dealing with in the moment. Seize the opportunity that you're actually in, not the one that you wanted to be in or that you hope to be in, but the one you're actually in. And so here's how he expresses that. There's a couple of simple facts that he's going to give, and then at the end he's going to give just a simple application of observation that should challenge us. The first fact that Solomon lays out is found in verse 1, and that is that our lives are ultimately in God's hands. This is a reminder of God's sovereignty, his providence at work in our lives. The good, the bad, the challenges, the difficulties, the strengths that we experience, all of these things come from how God deals with us in life, how God directs our lives. The paths of our lives are ordered by the Lord. And so we can make decisions, but ultimately he's the one who is guiding how our lives are going to play out. In verse 1, he says this, all this I considered in my heart, even to declare all this, that the righteous and the wise and their works are in the hands of God. No man knoweth either love or hatred by all that is before them. He basically is making 3 statements in that verse. The first is that our lives are in God's hands. In other words, he's the one who controls the ultimate ends of outcomes. Now, that doesn't downplay the significance of the decisions that we make. It's not saying our decisions don't matter. One of the ways that God guides our lives are through the decisions that we make. But the fact is that there's a limitation to how much our decisions will ultimately determine certain outcomes. There are times that we make poor decisions in life, And in spite of those poor decisions, God in his grace gives us good things. There are times that we make great decisions, but God recognizes that we need to be humbled. And what does he do? He limits the extent to which those good decisions are going to play out. There are times that God takes us through valleys. There are times that God gives us tremendous blessings. And the fact is that these things are ordered according to his wisdom and his goodness. God knows what's best for us. And so as we go through various circumstances, his hands are the ones that are directing those outcomes and how things will play out. The second thing we see is that we can't control the certainty of life's outcomes. Now, we can make good decisions and say, I anticipate a good outcome. But it's ultimately the Lord who controls how things are going to play out. You know, it's so interesting. We are in an election season, and there is so much riding on this election in our nation. And I know for a fact that many people, perhaps most people in this nation, are very concerned about the outcome of this election. You hear people say this all the time. This is the most significant election in our lifetime. People are saying that again, and I think there is a lot riding on it. But here's the simple reality. I don't think anybody right now can predict with any level of certainty how this election season is going to play out. We do not know what's going to happen in this nation come the second or third week in November. We really do not know. We don't know how that's going to play out. But the fact is, God already knows how it's going to play out. And so we're responsible to vote wisely, to vote according to conscience, to vote in a way that we think best preserves the liberties in our nation. But the fact is that God is going to be the one who picks our next leader. He's going to be the one who puts that person in the position that they're in. God lifts people up. He puts people down. And so we need to be responsible, but we need to recognize that God is the one who's ultimately in charge of the outcomes. We don't even know what events may radically shape the movement of the voting that goes on in this nation in the next week or two. We have absolutely no idea. Yet God knows. So the idea is that we can't control the certainty of life's outcomes. Those things are ultimately in the Lord's hands. And the third thing is this: we can't know beforehand life's outcome. Just like I can't control all the outcomes of life, I don't know how things are going to play out. In fact, a lot of times when I make decisions recognizing the potential outcome, what I hope will be the outcome, what I feel would be the best outcome, but in the end, I just don't know. I do not know how things will play out. And so what does Solomon do? He emphasizes the fact that we are so limited as creatures. We are responsible moral agents. Yet at the same time, we are ultimately dependent on God and how he decides to move in our lives. The second fact is this: our death is certain. So he's talked about the fact that there are a lot of uncertainties in life, but one thing is an absolute certainty, and that is that one day we will die. The length of our life is not certain, but the end of our life is. In other words, we know that the fact that we're born means there's going to be a day that we pass into eternity. We're going to go and we're going to meet God. And then we're going to enter into our eternal destination, whether we're in God's presence or not, determining what we do with the gospel. So the fact is that while there's so much uncertainty in life, there is something that's extremely certain. It's absolutely certain. And that's that we will stand before God and one day we will die. In verses 2 and 3, he puts it like this: all things come alike to all. There's one event to the righteous and to the wicked, to the good and to the clean, to the unclean, to him that sacrificeth, to him that sacrificeth not. As is the good, so is the sinner. He that sweareth, as he that feareth an oath. This is an evil among all things that are done under the sun, that there is one event unto all. Yea, the heart of the sons of men is full of evil, and madness is in their hearts while they live, and after that they go to the dead. Basically, Solomon says, whatever you do in life, one thing is absolutely certain: you will meet God. He makes basically two basic statements. In spite of everything that happens in this life, we're going to meet the same fate. People whose lives are distinguished by polar opposites when it comes to the values that determine the decisions they make, they will meet the same fate. And he gives all of these polar opposites, the righteous and the wicked, the good the clean and the unclean, those who sacrifice, those who don't sacrifice, those who make an oath, those who fear an oath. The idea is he's saying here are people that make completely opposite decisions in the patterns of life, yet they end up in the same fate. His point is death is certain, and we need to be prepared for that reality. We need to live as if it's a reality, something that's absolutely certain that we will face. Yet here's the third fact that's so very interesting that Solomon observes. These two facts don't stop people from wasting the opportunities before them. The fact that they realize that their lives are ultimately in God's hands. So the opportunities that they have are gifts from God. The blessings they experience are good gifts from God's good hand. The challenges that they face are things that God knows they must walk through for the sake of their own growth, for the sake of their own humility, for the sake of their learning about the nature and the ways of God. God is the one who controls those circumstances of life. And so even though people know that they are limited in life and that they will face death, it does not change the fact that the majority of people waste the opportunities that are before them. He says it this way in verse 3. This is an evil among all things that are done under the sun. There is one event unto all, yea, also the hearts of men are full of evil, and madness is in their hearts while they live. Now, when he says evil and madness in heart, he's basically saying people's hearts are full of evil and they're full of folly. He's basically saying people take the good gifts of God and they use them for evil and destructive ends. People take the opportunities that God gives them that they're to seize and use responsibly, and they treat them as if they don't have value. That's what folly is. It's wasting opportunity. He said, even though people recognize that they're going to die, and they recognize that there's a God who is sovereign, they still waste the opportunities before them. And he says this is an absolute tragedy. And by the way, it's not just the ungodly, it's not just people who don't know God, but many Christians tragically waste opportunity after opportunity that's set before them. And so when Solomon makes this statement, he's saying, I've observed in life, most people waste the opportunities available to them. But then there's a fourth fact, and this is really where there's hope. And notice what he says in verse 4. He says, to him that is joined to all the living, there is hope. Don't miss that. To him that is joined to all the living, there is hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. Now, this is a proverbial statement, and it's an extremely interesting proverbial statement. But this is basically what Solomon's saying. As long as you're living, you have opportunities to seize, so don't waste them. That's really what he's saying. As long as you live, you have opportunities to seize, so don't waste them. He compares a lion and a dog. Now, when we think of a dog, we think of this sweet pet that we enjoy having in our home, and we feed him and we take care of this dog, and this dog is loved by everybody in the house, unless it's my dog. My dog's not necessarily loved by everybody. But we think of a dog as this sweet, lovable creature. But the truth is, in a lot of cultures, that's not how people look at dogs. People look at dogs as dirty animals that roam the streets and basically eat trash. Dogs are not the cleanest of animals. They're animals that are scavengers. They'll eat whatever is available to them. And when they thought of a lion in the ancient world, they thought of this majestic, powerful creature that was able to do all kinds of things, an animal to be feared. And so when people thought of kings, a lot of times the animal that they would associate with the authority and the responsibility and the power of a king was a lion, because it's this majestic, terrifying creature that really cannot be stopped when it wants to do something. Yet here's what Solomon's saying. If you compare the lion and the dog is in the better place if he's alive. In other words, a dead lion doesn't have power and strength anymore. A dead lion can't seize any opportunities. A dead lion isn't fearsome But a living dog is actually in a better place and in a better position than the dead lion. His point is, as long as you're alive, you have opportunities for good. So don't waste the opportunities that are before you. If you woke up this morning and you're listening to this devotional thought, that means that you're in a better position than those who didn't. That means you have opportunities that people who are no longer with us don't have anymore. The truth is, the greatest men and women that have ever lived but are no longer living have no more opportunity to invest in eternity. They have no more opportunity to prepare to meet God. They already have. Their fate is sealed. What they've done with their life is now history. It's not a present moment. You and I have an opportunity to seize if we're still living. And so as long as our eyes open in the morning and our feet hit the ground, then we have opportunities that many before us no longer have. So here's the question we should ask. How do we practically apply this kind of a lesson? Let me give you just a couple of simple thoughts that I jotted down today as I was reflecting on the passage. Here's the first. Since we know that our lives are in God's hands, let's see life as both a gift and an opportunity. Hey, if God's in control of my life and he turns the direction of my life wherever he wills, then I need to recognize that there's purpose in what's going on in my life. The opportunities that I'm dealing with right now that are before me, they were given to me by God. The challenges and the struggles that I'm facing have redemptive purposes in God's mind. God wouldn't allow me to go through this very trying and troubling time if there wasn't a redemptive purpose in it. If he wasn't providing his grace so that I could be sustained in the midst of it. If there weren't lessons that I could learn and ways that I could actually please God in those circumstances. And so since I know that my life is ultimately guided by the hands of a good God who is providentially at work in my life, then I realize there are opportunities to seize and gifts to enjoy. The second thing I'll say is this. Since we know that death is certain, let's be motivated to seize each opportunity because the next is not guaranteed. We know there's going to be an end date. We don't know the day or the hour or how we're going to end up at that location. We don't know. But what is certain is that the opportunities we have today, there will be a day when it's the last one. And so we need to live life seizing opportunities, recognizing the next is not guaranteed. Thirdly, since we know that most people don't seize the opportunities before them, let's be in the minority and let's not waste the opportunities that God lays before us. The fact is, when Solomon writes this section of Ecclesiastes, his observation is that most people waste the opportunities before them. Most people don't seize those opportunities. They let them go, and then they wish they could have them back, but they can't. Let's be in the minority when it comes to this issue. And fourthly and lastly, since we woke up this morning, let's see today as a gift and an opportunity. I'm glad that you joined us today for our devotional thought. I hope it's been an encouragement to you. This passage has been a challenge to me, as every single one that I've gone through in Ecclesiastes has. If it's been an encouragement to you, I hope you shared that. Let's bow together for a word of prayer. Father, thank you for the opportunity to study this passage. I pray that you'll help us to understand the implications. Help us to live in the light of these truths. Help us not to waste the opportunities that are before us. Help us to realize that there is purpose behind the movements of our lives, and that you have a reason behind what we experience in life. Help us to trust you in the midst of those circumstances. Help us to live in the light of eternity. Help us not to be wasteful of your good gifts and the opportunities set before us. We ask these things in Christ's name. Amen. Well, it's been good to talk to you this morning. I hope that you have a great rest of your day. And Lord willing, we will continue our study tomorrow in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 9.